On December 16, 2020, Major League Baseball made an announcement following the 100th anniversary of the starting of the Negro Leagues that the Negro League stats would count as record in Major League Baseball, giving validity to the league that had only started due to segregation and produced some of the greatest players that we may have never heard of. Today we're going to dive into how this happened and the quality of the Negro Leagues today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide, as you daily learn more about sports history, increasing your sports knowledge. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, who now has the highest career batting average all time in baseball history, thanks to adding the Negro League stats? Listen throughout the episode to get the answer, and if you miss it, I'll give it to you at the very end. Now, first we gotta start with how the Negro Leagues actually began. And before 1987, there wasn't a color barrier to baseball. Moses Fleetwood Walker and his brother Weldie Walker played professional baseball in the 1880s. However, in 1887, baseball started becoming organized and they banned black players through unwritten rules, as teams did not feel they could be successful having black players. As a result of this, black players began to form their own teams and play independent leagues and have barnstorming tours. Now, a barnstorming tour is similar to what the Harlem Globetrotters are, or the Savannah Bananas, where they travel around the country playing exhibition games, playing in front of crowds of all types, and that way they can generate income, as they may not be able to have a league like Major League Baseball. But in an episode we covered previously, we'll put a link in the description of this episode about how the Negro National League started. It all started with Rube Foster, who was a former pitcher and became known as the father of baseball, as he envisioned a professional league that could rival Major League Baseball with just Negro players, as they weren't allowed to play in the major leagues. Now, he struggled with this concept, especially financially, as it was the 1920s, which was great until the Great Depression, and you were dealing with black players who couldn't get paid as much, who people wouldn't pay as much to see the black players, and it was just financially hard. But over time, they did develop some stable teams, such as the Chicago American Giants and the Kansas City Monarchs, who's best known for having Jackie Robinson on their team before he integrated into baseball. And as they continued to grow this league, players began to become better equipped to play, and the games on the field played better. Now, one thing you will notice if you do dive into these stats, and we'll put a link into all the stats that have been integrated into baseball now, they don't play as many games, as it was more of a financial burden on them, and we don't have stats on every game. But so how did Major League Baseball decide to let these stats be included into the official stats? Well, the main reason was led by Steamhead Negroes League database. This database was not just hearsay. They looked at box scores, newspaper articles, score sheets, which are very hard to find from the 1920s to when they officially ended in 1958, to when they fizzled out around 1948. But this was a group of people that really looked into everything, going all the way back from 1886 to 1948, when baseball really got integrated and it started to change the game. And the reason why baseball really wanted to add these in is not only were these stats credible, they weren't just hearsay, they weren't just stories, which if you listen to the Satchel Paige episode, there's a lot of stories made up about this time and this period, which are like fishing stories, which the more you tell it, the bigger the story, the crazier the numbers. But they looked at the actual numbers that they could find, and they only included ones they could verify. And if they couldn't verify it, they didn't include it, which made baseball think that this was verified so they could count these. And it showed also that the play that they had in the Negro Leagues at the time rivaled the Major League Baseball. They wouldn't include the stats if the play was subpar, but it wasn't. These players were great. Almost all the players that started to integrate became all-stars, became MVPs, became Cy Young winners. They integrated and had great success, which proved that the players and the quality in the Negro Leagues was just on par, or if not better even, than the Major League Baseball, because they focused on the quality of players, not the color of their skin. So the question is, what really changed from adding these stats? And there was one big change that came from this, and it was Josh Gibson. Now, if you don't know Josh Gibson, it's not surprising as he put up great stats, but sadly, he passed away before they started to integrate baseball at the age of 35. And even though he was 35, if he was able to play, he probably would have made a major impact. And when they took his Negro stats, he had a batting average of 372 for his career, which meant he passed the batting average of Ty Cobb, who had a 367 batting average for his career, which changed the record for the highest batting average for a career, which is now held by Josh Gibson and likely may never be broken. So he will always be in the record books for this change. He also became the career leader in slugging percentage, passing Babe Ruth, and on base percentage. Josh Gibson was a player we need to cover in a future episode, and we will, as he played fantastic, as he was a 12-time All-Star in the Negro Leagues, playing from 1930 to 1946, and is included in the Pirates Hall of Fame as well as the Washington National Ring of Honors. And in 1972, he was actually inducted into the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame, and now his stats are also on display. Other changes that happened is players like Willie Mays, who started in the Negro Leagues and made it to the majors, increased his batting total, moving him up. The hits total increased his hit total, moving him up. And Satchel Paige, who we covered on our previous episode, only had 28 wins to his name before this change, was able to move it all the way up to 125 wins. Now you'll notice most of these are percentages. Most of these changes, such as Josh Gibson's, were percentages as they didn't play as many games, as they would only play 60 to 80 games a season compared to over 100 played by Major League Baseball. So the total numbers weren't played, but it also increased a lot of other things. And Jackie Robinson himself actually increased his total hits because of his time played with the minors. So what this really changed was the perception of the Negro Leagues. As we look back, we now see how influential and how great the Negro League was back in the day. And now we have the chance to honor it. Now, it's estimated that only about 72% of the records from 1920 to 1948 were included in this amount, as they were the ones that could be substantiated. Because there's lots of games that didn't have news coverage, didn't have box scores, didn't have anything to confirm this. So there could have been more hits. There could have been even more. But they also had to scrutinize this, as there were games that had just half information, but they couldn't include the whole thing because they couldn't include what happened throughout the entire thing. So throughout all this, there was more than just the Negro National League. There was the Eastern Color League, the American Negro League, East-West League, the Negro Southern League, the Negro American League. But through all of this, though, and we mentioned barnstorming earlier, they did not include any of the barnstorming events as they were exhibitions. So there were many games and many things included in this change to the stats, but they were not included in every single aspect. Now, the fact that we had to have a Negro League at the time is pretty shocking by today's standards. Unfortunately, time has different stories, and things were different back then, sadly. If things would have been like today, we probably would have seen records that may have never be beaten, but we don't get that chance to go back. At least baseball went back and added these records to change the narrative and show how great this league was. So throughout the years, everyone else can know the same. And I want to thank you for listening to today's episode. If you want more baseball history, check out My Baseball History, where your host Dan takes you through all you need to know about baseball, and listen to this promo for his show.
My Baseball History is a long-form interview podcast with and about the people who make baseball what it is. Whether it's a former player, coach, bat boy, historian, artist, or collector, on each episode, I'll talk to someone new who has some sort of association to the game. I'm your host, Dan Wallach, and you can follow along with me and my guest every episode through the pictures and links in the liner notes at shoelesspodcast.com, or listen to My Baseball History wherever you're listening right now.
And we'll put a link in the description so you can check out the My Baseball History podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening. It really helps other people know how great the show is so they can come check it out as well. And we continue to grow and give you even more daily sports history. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? When the Negro League stats were added, who is now the all-time leader in batting average? And the answer is Josh Gibson, who had a career batting average of .372, passing Ty Cobb's .367.